Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is my EDFN530 Ignite presentation. This is the final presentation. My name is Rich Batts and I will be doing my presentation on formative assessment, more specifically the effective feedback aspect of it. So before we talk about it, we have to talk about what is formative assessment. So formative assessment is kind of the processes that teachers use in order to gauge where the students are at and to help them get to that next step in learning. Where am I going? Where am I now? How do I close the gap? Effective feedback is going to be what we need to be able to use. So feedback is effective when it consists of information about progress. So down bottom there, in the comic, they gave feedback to the dog, but it wasn't very effective because the dog doesn't know where to proceed. So in our effective feedback, there are 5 different characteristics. The first directs the attention to the intended learning, pointing out strengths and then offering specific information to help them get to where they need to go. So what the student has done well, along with specific information to guide improvement. Down there in that comic, 3 times 2 equals 5. They might have set up the equation correctly, however they didn't solve it correctly, so you might want to give them information on how to maybe solve that a little bit better in the future. Success feedback is going to identify what is done correctly and describe a quality present in their work. You want to point out effective use of the strategy or process. However, in order to take it one step further, we have to use next step feedback. So in next step feedback, we're going to identify a correction. We're going to describe a feature of quality needing work. So now instead of going past their praise, you're going to make a suggestion in order to help them get to that next step of where they need to go. Characteristic number 2 occurs during learning while there's still time to act on it. Effective feedback is only effective if the students still have time to act on it. One of the bigger debates that I've noticed in the text that I noticed is it fair to grade before mastery is reached? Formative assessment should not count towards the students because it's a formative assessment. It's not a summative. It's asking them to see what they know. So going into our third characteristic of effective feedback, addressing partial understanding. So in the comic there, I taught him, I didn't say that he learned it. Okay, so we have to be able to recognize that students aren't all at that same spot. They might still be confused about certain aspects. So there's a difference between a total lack of understanding and just a partial understanding. So effective feedback is not going to be helpful if they don't understand any bit of it. This comic, there was a big part that was missing from the previous slide. So they might have been missing that big chunk of information. Our fourth characteristic does not do the thinking for the student. Okay, we do not want as educators to give the students all the information because that diminishes their critical thinking ability. It diminishes all of their different aspects that they need to improve on. So if we provide too much feedback to them, we may do the thinking for the students, and their only next step would be to follow the directions. Their next step wouldn't be to better themselves or learn the material. It would just be to follow the directions. The fifth and final characteristic of effective feedback would be that limits corrective information to the amount of advice the student can act on. Myself, you, everyone else has a limit of what we can act on in a specific time. If we give too many pieces of advice to the student, too much feedback might overwhelm them, they might forget what's going on, and they might not know where to go. So my question at the bottom there is, how much feedback is too much? Well, that's up to the teacher to decide with that particular student. So other forms of feedback that we can talk about would be peer feedback and self-assessment. So our peer feedback is going to be the first one we're going to discuss. From here, what we want to look at is that peer feedback practice makes perfect. You want to have students pairing up, giving feedback to each other. 3-minute conferences, the students switch between the teacher and student roles. So one student can act as the teacher, giving them specific feedback mechanisms. What's nice about this is that's also going to build into their self-assessment abilities. So after mastery of that peer feedback and providing feedback, now they can provide feedback to themselves. This is going to build on their critical thinking, their problem solving, and it'll help them show what is good work. So in conclusion, effective feedback is effective when students can act on it. They need time to act on it. If there's no action, there's no gain. Along with peer and self-assessment are tools we need to utilize in the classroom to help those students get to where they need to be. Closing remarks, I would just like to say thank you for listening to my Ignite presentation, and keep in mind Even if we think a student got somewhere and they did not, then there was really no gains there at all, and we need to go back and reteach or help them. Thank you guys for listening to my night presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed the course as much as I did. Thank you.